Hey VC, it's Mazzy, and there's something going around. In fact, there's usually something going around here at the VC, and the dangerous thing is a lot of us catch it. And I'm talking about records people suggest. All of a sudden, you get the bite, the itch, the bite to scratch, and you go buy it. There's a thread going around, and at first I thought it was a contest, but I couldn't totally trace the lineage, and it seemed like something I had already done before in the past. But it's about 10 artists you've seen live. And I know there was one about live albums, live concerts you've been to, or maybe that's just one I posted. I did a story about that, about shows I went to, like The Last Waltz, and I showed that soundtrack. But I thought this was a fun one, and I'm going to narrow it to jazz, mainly because I've been in a real big jazz mode lately. I'm redoing or doing the big shift in my record room. If you saw my last whack-a-mole, where I moved my records around, took the doors out, all my jazz records for the time being are on the floor here. And I'm going to be, over the next few weeks, securing some space from this book collection and putting my jazz here so they're not like, stuck down behind gated walls. I want those out. I don't want to build a wall in front of my jazz collection. Come on. And I see a lot of people are getting into jazz. A lot of you VC members who really didn't know a lot about jazz are opening up to jazz. Obviously, young people like Chris at the Man Cave, he's really into it. He's been into it. He's into, if you don't watch him, you need to go see, was it Tales from the Man Cave? Or, Chris, he's having a great contest now. But he's really knowledgeable about first pressings, and he'll only do the first pressing, like, hey VC, this is your man Chris. It sounds nothing like him. God, it sounds like a black blues player rather than Chris from the South. Anyway, I'm going to show some jazz artists and albums by some of the artists, 10 artists, give or take 10, that I saw in the 70s. And I do that because I'm age of that sweet spot. Maybe now as I get older, I wish I was younger, but hey, I was in my late teens, actually from 16 to 26 throughout the 70s. Great time to see music in the Bay Area, growing up in the Bay Area. Great time to see rock and roll, which is a whole other thing I've spoken about in the past. But I'm going to share some records and artists and stories of some of the great jazz artists. There was a great club in San Francisco called the Keystone Corner in North Beach. And from around 74 to, I don't know, 79, 80 or so, I went to that club all the time as I got into jazz through my first college roommate, Brooks. Brooks and I worked in a record store together. He came up from Santa Barbara, and we had our turntable stereo. We had a two-bedroom apartment in San Francisco, and we always had this thing in the morning. Whoever got first would run to the turntable to put on a record, and he'd always, not always, but a lot in the mornings, he'd put on jazz. So it got to be a running joke that Brooks, you always put on jazz shit. So we always have a thing when we text each other to this day. He's still in San Francisco, and we're still best of buddies. And I said, oh, I've been playing some jazz shit. So we use a shit emoji. And it's not to say bad things about jazz, because I love it. But also another amazing venue that I bet you most of you don't know about unless you're from the Bay Area, and it's still around to some capacity, but it's called the Bach, like as in B-A-C-H, Bach Dancing and Dynamite venue. What is it called? Club. I'm blanking out. The Bach, God, I can't even think right now. The Bach Dancing and Dynamite Society, that's it. And it's just about 35 minutes south of San Francisco in Miramar, which is right before Half Moon Bay on the beautiful San Francisco coast. Well, this guy, Pete Douglas, late 50s, bought a little beach shack. And he's sort of the bohemian type that invited people to stay there and everything, and eventually started having Sunday concerts. And he kind of added on to the shack, and he built a stage, and I think it only held about 100 people initially in terms of the lofts and the outdoor areas. But throughout the 70s, in 60s and 70s, he had the most amazing jazz artists play there, usually after they would play in San Francisco the weekend before. So if someone was playing Friday, Saturday nights at the Keystone, they do a Sunday afternoon gig, and literally you'd show up at the house. It's probably more formal now, but this is in the '70s. You'd show up, you'd put money in a jar, you open the refrigerator to grab a beer or some wine, and you just hang out. You right by the Pacific Ocean, walk along the beach. Well, anyway, the artists that I saw at both the Keystone and at the Bach Dynamite at a very intimate selling was Bill Evans. I'm at that sweet spot age-wise. This is his first record, first solo record. Is on Riverside, produced by Oren Keep News. This is a comp that has some outtakes, piece, and other pieces. Obviously, some of the great stuff he did. And this is with the trio with Sam Jones, Philly Joe Jones, also Paul Chambers, Philly Joe Jones, Ron Carter, Jim Hall, Bill Evans. This one has Teddy Kotick and Paul Motion. I should know that by now. But Bill Evans, I saw fucking Bill Evans. So amazing, so amazing. I'm not going in any particular order, but Miles Davis. Now, obviously, I was too young. I never saw the Black Hawk. To this day, the Black Hawk, which was in the Tenderloin District on Gulf Street in San Francisco, they tore it down, I guess, back in the late 60s, early 70s. It's still an empty parking lot, kind of a Skid Row area. It's really sad. But I saw Bill Evans I saw Miles Davis around 75, 76. Stanford University Frost Amphitheater outside. Did Fusion. Have some great photographs, which I wish I could post here. I don't do inserts, but have some great photographs of that show. Only time I ever saw Miles. And he opened up for the New Riders of the Purple Sage. But anyway, Miles Davis, at least I saw him. He did one song that lasted about 45, 50 minutes. That was it. Kind of jamming. Another of my favorite keyboard players was Chick Corea. And actually, I got into Chick Corea because of these two albums, Return to Forever, which is not the more traditional and melodic acoustic piano jazz he did early on. There's a great new Tone Poet record of his you ought to get. But these two on Polygram ECM basically, this one with Flor Purim, Airto, Jill Farrell, and Stanley Clarke. More fusion, very Brazilian. Flor Purim, so friggin' great. Ended up seeing her and Airto live right when they got out of prison for a coke possession. 500 Miles High on this. Written by Chick Corea. Neville Potter wrote the lyrics. But a lot of people aren't into jazz with vocals, but these are friggin' incredible records. Beautiful records. Beautiful. And a young rock guy like me, I got into the melodic sound. Remember early 70s? This was 72 and 73, these records. And, that was a singer-songwriter period. James Taylor, Carole King, that. But to get into this kind of stuff with Chick Corea. But I saw him also, I think I saw him in Berkeley at, was it Zellerbach? I can't remember where. I saw Flora and Airto at Zellerbach on the UC Berkeley campus. Another great show. I saw him twice at the Keystone Corner, Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. I'd have to look it up. I don't remember which group of Jazz Messengers. So any of you jazz freaks, who was he touring with around 75, 76? I should look it up. I should have done research here. But I saw him twice. Saw him once in New York at the Village Vanguard and once in San Francisco at the Keystone Corner. So, the Jazz Messengers was an ongoing, his group, but he, like people like Miles Davis, was one of those artists that was a great school of jazz musicians that come through. This particular record, who's on this one, was Sonny Stitt, McCoy Tyner, and Art Davis. In fact, let me go a little out of order here. That brings us to McCoy Tyner, another artist I saw at the Keystone Corner in San Francisco. I remember seeing him, I only saw him once, and if you know, he was in Coltrane's great quartet way back in the day. And as a young pianist. Oh, with Miles too, actually. But on this is a various collection, kind of an overview of Blue Note things with Hubert Laws, Gary Bartz, Harold Vick, Al Gibbons, Andrew White, Herbie Laws, Freddie Watts. Anyway, these were recorded probably late 60s, actually, 69, 70-ish. So a little different than his earlier Blue Note work, but McCoy Tyner was great. But the thing I remember about him, but I used to refer to him as in a way, the Led Zeppelin of jazz piano players, because he had this really intense hit on those keyboards. Great, great, great sound. But McCoy Tyner, another one I was able to see at the Keystone Corner. Earl Hines, Earl Father Hines. Now, I did a internship with the local San Francisco PBS station, KQED, when I was at San Francisco State and Broadcasting Department and doing audio and sound recording. And I did a series of live jazz recordings. I was like one of 3 guys that was working on this. And I had heard Earl Hines. I didn't know him from Adam until Ry Cooder's Paradise and Lunch. And the version on that album of Diddy Wah Diddy is Ry Cooder and Earl Hines. And Earl Hines' piano playing on that is unbelievable. It's so beautiful. And just, it's just really catchy and really great. So those of you that have Ry Cooder, Paradise and Lunch, as soon as we hang up here, as soon as you hang up from me, pull it out, and it's the last track on the album, I believe, Diddy Wah Diddy, and listen to that piano playing. But I got into Earl Father Hines, and I think I got this album first when I worked in I was working in a record store then as well. But what's great about that, I did a live recording at the College of Marin, Marin County across the Golden Gate Bridge. And so I got to meet him, set up his microphones on his piano, and it was cool. This is obviously an earlier one, Earl's solo piano record, kind of a cool cover. This is on Chiaroscuro Records, 15 Charles Street, New York. And then he did some records where he did the standards. I think he did Gershwin and the like, and he did some larger quartet stuff in the 40s as well. But Earl Father Hines. I like melodic piano players too, like him, and I like Oscar Peterson. I didn't pull tonight, but I did see Oscar Peterson as well. I loved Oscar Peterson. Some jazz aficionados kind of poo-poo Oscar Peterson, him being very melodic, but I think he's great. Herbie Hancock. Seen him several times in various incarnations over the years. I did see the VSOP, the very special one-time performance where the quintet kind of got the band back together when Miles was on hiatus, I believe. That was probably 76 or 77, 78, with Freddie Hubbard, Tony Williams on drums, Ron Carter, and anyway, any of these, I didn't see him obviously early on, but I saw him in larger venues, and then I saw him once when he was doing the fusion work. But Herbie Hancock, another great artist I've seen, and I mean, he's one of those amazing guys that I didn't love everything. For a while, I couldn't stand the Warner Brothers stuff, but now I'm really getting into it, that sort of the electric African stuff of his too. So in the 70s for a while, after I saw Weather Report too, I didn't pull any Weather Report records, great fusion band, but I couldn't listen to them for like 20 years. Same with John McLaughlin, who I saw too, and I did not include him in this. Okay. I know since I'm a senior citizen, I repeat myself like your grandfather does when you're sitting around, or your father, depending on your age. Dizzy Gillespie. I friggin' love Dizzy Gillespie. He's one of the crossover artists from bebop, old school, into the Afro-Cuban stuff that I love. DG Dave's great Savoy series of records, Savoy reissues, came out in the 70s. They sound great. I mean, they're not hi-fi, but really good. But this has classics like 2 versions of Caravan, Swing, Low Swing Cadillac, Bopsy Blues, Sunny Side of the Street, some standards as well. But I just love this stuff. But my story, which I may have told, 1978, Monterey Jazz Festival. That's the same venue where the Monterey Pop Festival took place. I was there in '78, and happened to be, because I knew some people in the K-Jazz booth. KJAZ, K-Jazz was the Berea jazz station for a while, for a long time. No longer exists, unfortunately. And I was in the booth, and I sat right next to the doing interview, and I don't know why and how I did it, but I was sitting next to Dizzy Gillespie. He was stoned off his ass. He was passing a joint around, or somebody was, and I smoked a joint that Dizzy Gillespie handed me. And he read a live on the air advert for Tower Records. And he talked about the Tower Records. He goes, I know that place that, I'm not even trying to do a Dizzy Gillespie impression unless I do this. You know, if I have to tell you what that's about, Google Dizzy Gillespie's cheeks. But he read the on-air advert for Tower Records, Columbus and Bay near Fisherman's Wharf, and there used to be a round hotel called the Villa something. He goes, I used to stay at the Villa across from Tower Records all the time, and so that was kind of cool. Anyway. Okay, next, Stan Getz. Obviously, I didn't see him at this period of his career. This is way too early, early 60s, 63, 64-ish. Great, the whole samba, you know, Getz Gilberto, and Louis Bonfa. This whole series are just really great. It was kind of a craze, the Girl from Ipanema, Brazilian craze that was on. But I saw him again in the 70s. I saw him again, I think I saw him in Berkeley as well. But I saw Stan Getz, so I'm very lucky. Oh, that's wrong, I didn't like that. Okay, and last but not least, and I don't know if this is 10, maybe it's 11, does it matter really? The greatest jazz singer of all time, the greatest jazz pop singer of all time, Ella Fitzgerald. If you need one live album of hers, you get this one, Ella in Berlin. For two songs, For Mac the Knife and How High the Moon. Her scatting on that is unbelievable. Everybody needs this record. Ella in Berlin, you need this record. One of the great live jazz vocal records. But you know she was a great pop singer. But this is a record that no one ever talks about. It's an amazing record. Clap hands, Here Comes Charlie, and it's on Verve. It's got Crimea River, it's got some standards, but it's got Night in Tunisia. It's a record, if you see this record, find it. You don't see it a lot. You don't see it a lot in great shape. I have no idea if it's expensive. I don't see it very often. I think mine's a mono version too, which is even better. But a wonderful, wonderful record. Now with Ella, you can't have too much Ella. I have so much Ella on compact disc, but I also have, this was a great record. This was was it last year, I believe? A record store day on Verve, Ella at Zardi's. Famous Hollywood jazz club, pop club, dinner theater. Really good record. But these are two of the most amazing kind of sets that you could get. Not standard jazz stuff. I mean, obviously there's some great stuff of Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong. But if you like popular music, beautifully recorded popular music, you need Ella Fitzgerald songbook series. You can get box sets on CD, you can do that. But these are two that I highly, highly recommend. The recordings of these are from all analog sources, and they're stunningly beautiful recordings. This is the Cole Porter songbook, and it's a box set of, I don't know how many records it is, but it's all the Cole Porter songbook. They did these artists did a series of records back in the day, back in the early 60s, and this is great. But if you have to get one, and you want to really shoot your wad, probably shouldn't talk like that, but all 6 volumes, Nelson Riddle orchestrated this one, George and Ira Gershwin songbook. What's great about this box, this came out a few years ago, it has these great sleeves of the original covers of all the records. oh God. So the actual records come in these regular sleeves, not separate covers, so that's why they have those. But how many records are there? 8 records? 7, 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 records or so. Plus it has a book on the Gershwins, on George and Ira Gershwin. Nelson Riddle and Ella Fitzgerald. But I tell you, this is some of the great music ever recorded. Wonderful. You know, don't think of it as sappy pop stuff. Great American music. Gershwin. Do you know Gershwin? Rhapsody in Blue. George and Ira Gershwin, words and music. Ella Fitzgerald, probably the person who sang their songs the best. Obviously, there's great Sinatra stuff of the songbook, but you know, I put my money on Ella Fitzgerald any day. So that is Mazzy's take on about 10. Now you probably count 11, I think, maybe. Artists that I've seen live. And this is the jazz series, the jazz artists I've seen live. And every single one of these I saw in the 70s. So again, I'm at that kind of perfect age to see people while they're still playable. What's the word? You'd have to wheel them on the stage, and no offense, but you know, I mean, sometimes I did go, this is on a little tangent. I always wanted to see Frank Sinatra. So I went to a place called the Circle Star Theater, which is about half hour south of San Francisco in San Carlos. And it's not there anymore, but it was where I saw my very first concert. I saw the Dave Clark 5 there too. But it's one of those venues, it's in a round building with a stage in the middle that circulates. And so half the time you're seeing their asses and the drummer, and half the time you see, you know, them as depending on how they come around. I saw Sinatra then. I saw him way too late. I saw him in the, was it late 70s, early 80s, maybe? And he had a teleprompter for his lyrics. He was trying to sell his hock as pasta sauce because, you know, Paul Newman had a pasta sauce, so Frank Sinatra had to have a pasta sauce to sell. And it was kind of a sad time to see him. But I wanted to see Sinatra, so I can say I saw Sinatra. It wasn't one of his better times. But all these jazz artists, they were amazing. And they're probably, what, in their 40s, 50s then, a lot of them. Maybe, obviously, Dizzy was probably the oldest of these artists. But they were still significant. They were still talented. Art Blakey. And then I'm not even talking about Tony Williams and, God, and Wayne Shorter. I've seen his band live at Keystone. I don't have a list of all the Keystone shows, but it was a great time and a great... you know, great music to see. All these, you know, people buying these like Blue Note and Verve reissues and things. And, you know, did I realize at the time what I was seeing was greatness? Yes. But I didn't see in the grand scheme of things just how great they were and what a wonderful time to see these artists. And, you know, it's just really kind of getting into jazz more and more when I was, I'd say, 23, 24, 25. And I've been into jazz ever since. Not you know, immersed into it like some people, but it's always been in part of my collection and part of my consciousness. So anyway, I'm getting all verklempt, as they say, a little serious here. But thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you don't already. What do you have got to lose, right? I'm not going to send you, you know, emails for discount coupons or anything. You might get some VCLT love. VCLT love? Maybe not. Maybe you won't. But subscribe, tell your friends, tell your family. Mazzy loves you, and thanks for watching. Bye, VC. Have a good week.